Hi, I'm Daniel Gold, and welcome to the Gold Standard Leadership Lab. By day, I'm a partner at a leading advisory firm where I draw upon my background as an attorney to help my clients succeed. This podcast, though, is my personal project, completely separate and apart from my day job, but reflects the same passion that I exhibit everywhere for teaching, mentoring, and helping others succeed through simple, impactful lessons. It is my hope that you'll walk away with practical takeaways to help you on your leadership journey. Thanks for being a part of this community and for joining me in the Leadership Lab. Let's get started. If you're anything like me, you have sat in rooms with leaders who delegate to team members and yet say it's yours while continuing to monitor, correct, and redo the work. Or maybe, in some self-reflection, it may have been you at one point. The assignment is real, but the autonomy is not. They are convinced that they are protecting quality. However, what they're really doing is preventing judgment and teaching learned helplessness. This is what I call the delegation lie, and it's pervasive throughout leadership regardless of industry. There's this gap between what we say we are doing and what's actually happening, and it's wide enough to park someone's entire professional career lifespan in. Because when we delegate authority while retaining decision-making authority, what we are really doing is handing off work while keeping surveillance on. We assign responsibility while making clear that nothing they do will really be enough until we have redone it. And afterward, we wonder why our teams stop thinking for themselves. I'm not convinced, though, that the problem is that our standards are too high. Rather, I think it may be that with all of the constant correction, our team has learned that compliance is what we actually value. I think I may be right about this because I've watched this play out in real time years ago. A leader that I worked with would delegate a project to a direct report, give clear instructions, and then show up 3 days into a 2-week timeline asking for updates. Now, it wasn't because something was going wrong, but rather because being in control felt like protection. The leader would find something to adjust, feedback would flow down, and the employee would shift course. 2 days later, another check-in, and yet another adjustment. By day 10, the employee just stopped thinking about what made sense for the project. They were thinking about what the leader wanted to see. And by day 14, when the work had landed, the leader reviewed it, found gaps, and redid significant portions of it before sending it to the client. That employee ultimately left the company, not because the work was hard, but because they had stopped feeling like they had anything to really contribute. You know, there's actual research behind this as well. Psychologist Martin Seligman's work on learned helplessness showed that when people are repeatedly told their actions don't matter because someone else will change them anyway, they stop trying to act, they become passive, they wait for direction, and ultimately develop learned helplessness. It is not because they lack ability, but because they've learned that their ability doesn't actually matter in this context. In a delegated context, this is exactly what constant correction produces. Every time a leader redoes delegated work, the message the team receives isn't do better, it's stop trying because your judgment doesn't matter here and I clearly don't trust you with the decision of how to do this. And again, there's research to back this. Psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan's research on self-determination theory goes deeper still. As it turns out, people need 3 things to be engaged. 1 is autonomy, 2, competence, and 3, relatedness. Autonomy is the sense that you have agency in how you work. Competence is the same sense that you can actually do the work well. And relatedness is the sense that the people you're working with actually value you. You see, when a leader prevents autonomy by constantly checking in and redoing the work, they're not protecting anything. They're dismantling the conditions upon which people can actually think for themselves. So a person can have massive competence and still disengage if autonomy is gone. If you remove the sense that your judgment matters, and everything else will ultimately end up following. I realized this problem years ago while building up a team myself. I brought operational urgency from my vendor background into a company that was already deeply client-focused. But I was channeling that sense of urgency the wrong way. I checked in constantly on delegated work, I redid tasks when they weren't meeting my alleged standard, and the team perceived this as control rather than care. What's so interesting is that what changed everything for me was what Kim Scott calls radical candor. I received candid feedback and was completely open, receptive, and grateful for what they had said to me because it changed me. What I understood that day is simple. The team didn't yet understand why urgency mattered the way that I perceived urgency. They didn't see the connection between speed and relationships. They didn't know what a delayed response to a client question, issue, or problem could be read by that client as indifference. And instead of spending my leadership energy on translation, I was just spending it on correction. I was preventing autonomy by refusing to trust the team I loved with the judgment of how to do the work I loved. And every time I redid something, I reinforced the message that their thinking wasn't really welcomed. And the irony is that the urgency I cared so much about wasn't actually coming through in my corrections. What was coming through was control. And I want to be clear here, there is a massive difference. Urgency rooted in client care makes teams move faster because they understand what they're moving toward. Urgency enforced through monitoring and rework slows teams down because they're waiting for approval instead of thinking through the problem on their own, because the team is talented enough. Think about the actual cost of the delegation lie over time. You have a manager who checks in constantly and redoes work. That manager is working nights and weekends because they're doing their work and redoing everyone else's, and they're exhausted and burnout happens. Their team is disengaged because nothing they do feels like it's good enough. Turnover is high, burnout is high, training costs are high, and the work product, which the manager is convinced requires their level of control to protect, actually suffers because it's being filtered through exhaustion and surveillance. Now, I want to take a moment here, and I want you to imagine a different scenario. A manager sets clear boundaries about what matters most: speed, accuracy, client relationship, whatever it is. And then the manager lets the team run. The manager does check-ins, but they're about progress against the goal and the outcomes, not about approval of the method. The manager makes their expertise available, but the team is the one doing the driving. And over time, the team actually gets faster. Why? Because they develop judgment about what matters because they've been trusted with it. They catch their own errors because they own the work. They call the manager when they hit a genuine constraint, not for permission. And the manager is free to think about the next thing instead of redoing today's work. To translate all this and boil it all down, one scenario burns you out, the other scales you. And that is a very big difference between the two. Guardrails enable autonomy. They say, here's the boundary, here's what I care about most, and within that, you decide. But micromanagement, that does in fact prevent autonomy. It says, here's exactly how you're going to do this, and I'm going to watch you do it. The guardrails conversation sounds like this. I need this by Thursday because the client reviews on Friday. The format matters because it goes directly to the decision maker. Beyond that, how you get there, it's your call. If you hit a wall, call me. Otherwise, I'll see it when it's done. Now that sounds right, but the micromanagement version sounds something like this. I'll handle the format, you handle the research. I'll review it before you send it, then I'll probably rework it. One conversation delegates authority with constraints, while the other delegates labor under surveillance. One says, I trust your judgment about how to get there, and the other says, I don't trust your judgment about anything. Guardrails also reveal trust. When a leader sets a boundary and then lets it be crossed without intervention, the team learns that the leader meant what they said. Micromanagement reveals the opposite. The team learns that the stated boundaries aren't real. The real rule is do what I would do. So here's something I'd like all of you to be challenged with. For 1 week, delegate a task to someone on your team and make a deal with yourself. No check-ins unless asked directly. No redoing the work, no corrections unless something is actually off the rails. And don't just do this passively. The best thing to do is track it. Write it down every time you have the urge to check in. Write down why. What was the trigger? What were you afraid would happen? Was it about the quality of the work or about your need to be in control? And at the end of that week, look at the list. Most leaders discover that the reason is rarely about protecting quality. It's about protecting the feeling of being in control. It's about the anxiety that comes from not knowing. It's about the fear that if you're not watching, something will fall apart and it will be your fault. And I think that is the trap. And it's worth seeing that clearly. So the final question I have for you is this. What version of yourself are you building right now? You might believe you are protecting quality, but the reality of leadership is captured in a single distinction. You either build people up or you keep them small. And those two outcomes are never the same. Nobody's eulogy praises a leader for redoing work because nobody else could do it right. The legacy that remains is whether you developed judgment in the people around you or simply extracted compliance. The delegation lie is a defense mechanism, protecting your need for control. Real protection looks entirely different. It means building a team that catches its own errors because they own the work. It means creating an environment where people call you for your deep expertise, not your permission. That is the credential worth protecting. Everything else, it's just work. And remember, leadership, it isn't about perfection. It is about progress. So take this lesson, put it into action, and continue setting the gold standard in your own life and at work. I'll see you all next time.